I'm Margaret Whitlow, 68 years old, and even after raising a son through widowhood and sacrificing everything to help his family, I somehow ended up being told to get out of the house. I bought with my own savings. He looked at me across the dinner table like I was something stuck to his shoe and said, "You're nobody here." Those words didn't come from a stranger. They came from Cuthbert, my only child. I went to bed early that night, packed my things in silence, and left before sunrise. The keys to the apartment I'd kept in secret clinked in my coat pocket, like they'd been waiting for this moment all along. By the end of the week, I would be sitting across from my lawyer, finally ready to tell the truth. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to walk away from a place that no longer saw your worth. I was born Margaret Sanders in a small Kentucky town where everyone knew your business and helped you anyway. My father worked maintenance at the mill, and my mother kept the home in perfect order with little more than flour, vinegar, and kindness. I grew up in a world where you made do, said please, and thank you, and never threw out anything that still had a use. Those lessons stayed with me through college, through marrying Harold Whitlow, and all through the years after I lost him too early. Cuthbert was 15 when his father died. Moody, quiet, brilliant with numbers, but never content with enough. I did my best, scraped together college money from my job as a staff accountant at the local transit office, and kept his pride intact when things didn't work out as planned. When he couldn't get approved for a mortgage, I bought the house myself. Let him believe the bank changed their mind. It wasn't just a kindness. It was a way of keeping him from folding in on himself. I told myself, that's what mothers do. 12 years passed in that house. I cooked most of the meals, helped raise his 2 children, and stayed in what Effie, his wife, always called the guest room, even after 5 Christmases and 6 birthdays spent under that roof. I didn't complain. Not when she corrected me for calling my grandson Izzy instead of Eisenbard. Not when she tossed out food I'd made from scratch because she didn't like the smell. I just folded napkins, picked up toys, and refilled juice cups without asking. That night, I made a simple comment over dinner. Maybe the new boat can wait until you pay off the car note. I said it with the softest tone I could manage, the one I used with clients back when I still worked at Transit Express. Cuthbert's fork froze midair. Effie's mouth twitched like she'd just bitten into something bitter. They both stared like I'd insulted their wedding vows. He said it like a judge passing sentence. "We've been over this, Mom. In my line of work, image matters." Cuthbert worked as a property appraiser for the county. He always made it sound like he chaired the Federal Reserve. I didn't answer. I just looked down at the salmon I'd overcooked and tried to will the tension out of the air. But it only got worse. By dessert, Effie was criticizing the vegetables, and Cuthbert was snapping at the kids. When I stood to clean the plates, he barked at me to leave them. Effie said the cleaner's coming tomorrow. I put the dish back down like it had burned me. My grandson gave me a look I'll never forget. At 10 years old, he understood what humiliation looked like. Then came the real blow. He stood up, his wine glass in hand, and said, "You're always counting every penny I spend, always trying to make me feel small." Well, guess what? This is my house, my family, and you. You're nobody here. It was quiet after that. Amaryllis started to cry. Eisenbard stared at the floor. Effie didn't say a word. I walked to my room, packed 2 suitcases and 1 box, and didn't cry once. The cab driver didn't ask questions, just helped me load the trunk and drove me toward the other life I'd quietly prepared. The apartment was small but clean, lemon-scented and quiet. I used the key I'd carried for 5 years always in my coat pocket and turned it in the lock like I was opening a door to something I didn't know I'd need. 2 days later, I called Clive Atwood, my old attorney, and asked for a meeting. I told him I was ready to talk about the house. Because the house on Briarwood Lane, the one Cuthbert thought belonged to him, it had always been mine. That Friday came with a gray sky and a restless wind that rattled the porch rails. I stood outside Riverbend Elementary, waiting for Eisenbard, watching the children stream out in little groups, backpacks, swinging sneakers thudding softly on the pavement. And then there he was, scanning the crowd eyes, searching until he saw me. His whole face lit up. He didn't say anything, just ran into my arms and held on tight like he hadn't exhaled all week. His teacher, Miss Pratt, followed a few steps behind. "Mrs. Whitlow, could I speak with you for a moment?" I nodded and sent Izzy to sit on the bench near the entrance with his backpack. Miss Pratt's face was kind, but concerned. "I don't mean to overstep, but Eisenbard's been struggling lately. He hasn't turned in homework. His tests aren't like they used to be. It's clear something's weighing on him." I told her gently that I was aware of the situation at home. "I'll make sure he has some quiet time this weekend. We'll get him caught up." Miss Pratt paused again. "There's also a balance overdue for lunches and the field trip." "I've sent notes, but I haven't heard back from his parents." "How much?" I asked. She told me, and I reached into my purse for my checkbook. As I filled it out, a mix of emotions settled in my chest. I'd spent my life balancing other people's books. Still, I never imagined I'd be covering lunch debt for my own grandson while his father pretended nothing was wrong. That evening, after supper and homework, Eisenbard sat at the kitchen table with his new model airplane kit spread out in front of him. We'd picked it up on the way home. He was coloring one of the wings when he asked Grandma, "Are we going to lose our house?" I put down the dish towel. "Why do you say that, honey?" He didn't look up. "Daddy said we might. He said it's all because of some investments that went bad. Then Mommy got mad and started yelling. They always yell now. At night mostly. I can't sleep." He glanced at me. "What's an investment?" I sat down beside him. "It's when someone puts money into something hoping it'll grow into more money later. But sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes people lose what they put in." "Like a bet?" he asked, frowning. I hesitated. "Sometimes yes." He picked at the edge of the sticker sheet. He talked about stocks and crypto and a company that folded. He said it was all supposed to help us move up. I reached over and gently smoothed his hair. "You don't need to worry about those things, Izzy. That's for the grown-ups to handle." He nodded, but I could see he wasn't convinced. The next morning, after I dropped him off at school, I ran into Effie at the grocery store. She looked thinner hair pulled back into a rushed ponytail, shadows under her eyes that no concealer could hide. She was halfway down the canned goods aisle when she saw me, and I watched her hesitate before pretending not to notice. "Effie," I called gently. "How are you?" She forced a smile, but didn't stop walking. "Fine, we're fine. Izzy's teacher spoke to me. She said he's behind on work. He's anxious." Effie's mouth tightened. "He'll be all right. It's just temporary stress. If there's anything I can do." "We don't need your help," she cut in, and then she sighed. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired." We stood in silence for a moment. She shifted her weight and looked at her watch. "Cuthbert's working on it. He'll fix it. He always does." There wasn't any conviction in her voice, only the weight of someone holding up a story that was wearing thin at the seams. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. It was Wendell Pierce, a family friend and the attorney who had helped manage Harold's estate after he passed. I hadn't seen him in years. He looked older now, hair thinning at the temples tie askew, like he'd left work in a hurry. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by," he said. "I'm here. Unofficially." I brought him inside and poured him a cup of coffee. He didn't touch it. "I heard what's going on with Cuthbert," he began. "There's an investigation, real estate appraisal fraud. The DA suspects he's been undervaluing properties in exchange for kickbacks." I sat still listening. "They're also looking into personal finances. He's heavily leveraged. Credit card debt, missed payments, late fees." He glanced at me. "I believe he's remortgaged the house multiple times. He used it as collateral." My breath caught. "He can't mortgage that house. It doesn't belong to him." Wendell looked confused. "What do you mean? I walked to the cabinet and pulled out the folder I'd shown Clive Atwood. I bought that house 12 years ago. It's in my name. Cuthbert never owned it. Wendell sifted through the documents. If that's true, Margaret, this changes everything. If he used a property he doesn't legally own, that's fraud, and any loans attached to it could be voided. I nodded. Clive's already handling it. He filed the paperwork. We're moving quickly. Wendell rubbed his jaw. You'll want to protect your title before the foreclosure moves forward. Once the state seizes assets, untangling ownership becomes a nightmare. He left with a copy of the papers. I called Clive that evening and brought him up to speed. He confirmed the title still held strong, but agreed the situation was worsening. 3 nights later, the phone rang at 2:00 a.m. I recognized Trixie's name on the screen. They've posted the notice, she said, barely breathing. Seizure notice. Police are there now. Georgina saw the whole thing from across the street. Said there were men in suits and agents with briefcases. I sat upright. Is anyone arrested? Not yet. But it's bad. She paused. Don't you go running to fix it this time. Not again. I promised I wouldn't. But when I called Eisenbard's number and found it disconnected, my stomach turned. I left a message anyway. Izzy, Grandma's here. Call me when you can. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just after sunrise, the phone rang again. It was Cuthbert. His voice cracked the moment I said hello. Mom, I need your help. They took the house. They're saying I committed fraud. Eisenbard's crying. Effie's screaming. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes and let the quiet settle around me. What is it you want, Cuthbert? Money? A place to stay? I don't know something. I need you. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask how I was. Just launched straight into the plea. I took a breath. I can't help you this time. What? You're my mother. You have to help me. No, I said softly. I don't have to. Not anymore. He grew desperate, angry, then quiet again. For the kids, then. If not for me, then for them. I waited. Then I told him the truth, that the house was mine, that it had always been mine, and the pause on the other end was so long I could hear him breathing. You're lying, he said. Check the deed, I answered. He begged. He cried. He promised to change. He asked what I was going to do. I'm going to protect what's mine, I said, and make sure my grandchildren are safe. The line went still for a moment. Then he asked, What happens now? We meet at the house. 10 o'clock. My lawyer will be there. We'll talk then. Mom, good night, Cuthbert. I set the phone down. The room was still. Outside, the sky had started to pale with the first light of morning. In just a few hours, I'd walk into that house again, this time with the truth at my side. I was up before the sun. I laid out my gray suit the night before, simple pressed with a pearl pin on the lapel, the same one I used to wear for board presentations back when I worked payroll at Transit Express. I boiled water for tea, but forgot to pour it. My hands were steady, but everything inside me felt like it was waiting for a signal that hadn't come yet. At 9:40, Clive Atwood called to say he was 10 minutes away. I met him at the curb outside my building. We didn't say much during the ride, just the quiet shuffle of folders being organized, pen caps clicking into place, documents smoothed along the seams. As we turned the corner onto Briarwood Lane, the house came into view. Yellow tape still hung across the front steps. A paper notice had been nailed to the door. 2 cars sat crooked in the yard, Cuthbert's old sedan and a silver SUV I didn't recognize. Clive parked along the curb and looked over at me. You ready? I nodded and opened the door. Before we could knock, the front door swung open. Cuthbert stood in the entryway. His shirt was wrinkled, and the circles under his eyes looked like they hadn't left for days. Behind him, Effie sat on the couch, unmoving arms crossed tight. Two men in dark suits stood near the fireplace. One of them stepped forward and introduced himself. Agent Donahue, District Attorney's Office, he said, extending a hand toward Clive. Your counsel for Mrs. Margaret Whitlow. Clive returned the handshake. Yes, I represent Mrs. Whitlow, the legal owner of this property. There was a pause then. Not loud, not theatrical, just stillness, like everyone in the room was deciding what to do next. Donahue raised an eyebrow. Legal owner Clive opened his briefcase. The house at 32 Briarwood Lane has been titled in my client's name since purchase. 12 years ago. Here's the bill of sale deed, annual tax returns, insurance, and utility history. He passed the documents to Donahue, who reviewed each page slowly. His partner, Agent Holt, stepped closer to glance over his shoulder. When Donahue spoke again, his voice was even. This changes the nature of our investigation. Cuthbert shifted. I didn't know, he said, barely above a whisper. I thought it was mine. She never told me. Holt raised an eyebrow. Mr. Whitlow, if you used a property as collateral on loans that you did not legally own, that may constitute real estate fraud. Effie looked up sharply. Wait, what are you saying? I stepped forward. My voice stayed even. He didn't know. I never told him. I let him believe the mortgage had been approved to protect his pride. He thought he qualified, but I paid for it, in full. That house has always been mine. Effie sat very still. And you only told him now? Donahue asked. I came forward when I found out he used it to secure multiple loans. Without my consent. Without my knowledge. The room was silent again. Donahue nodded. We'll need copies of all these documents for the official record. But this means the foreclosure proceedings are invalid, at least as they apply to this house. Holt added. Which also means your son's situation is significantly more serious than originally assumed. Cuthbert rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand. You let me live here for 12 years, thinking it was mine. I looked at him. You were proud. You'd just started your job. You had a baby on the way. You needed to believe you'd earned something. He stood there, chest rising fast, fists at his sides. So you lied to me. I let you believe what you needed to believe. I said quietly. But I never signed away ownership. He turned to Effie. Did you know? She shook her head. No, I didn't. Donahue stepped back. We'll give you some space to talk privately. Mrs. Whitlow, we'll follow up with your counsel. Mr. Whitlow, you're expected at our office at 10 a.m. tomorrow. They left without further comment. The front door clicked shut behind them. Clive gave me a nod, quietly gathering his papers. I'll wait in the car, he said. Take your time. I stood in the living room for a long moment. Effie glanced out the window. Cuthbert stood near the wall, not meeting my eyes. Where are the kids? I asked. With Effie's mother. Since the agents came. I nodded. Cuthbert finally turned around. What are you going to do with the house, with all of it? I haven't decided yet. Effie spoke without turning. If you want us to leave, just say it. You have every right. I looked at her. If you stay, you'll pay rent. Market rate, no favors, no assumptions. Cuthbert stared at me. You're charging your own son rent. You've taken money from me for years, Cuthbert. Loans favor school tuition gifts for the kids, $20,000 for a family vehicle that turned out to be a sports car just for you. He said nothing. I gave because I wanted to, but I never agreed to be used. His voice tightened. I'm in real trouble, Mom. I could go to jail. I know. And you're using this to punish me? No. I'm using this to stop the cycle. Effie crossed her arms. We'll find another place. A smaller apartment. I'll go back to full-time work. We'll manage. Cuthbert looked stunned. We're moving out. Yes, she said, calm and clear. This was never our house. He turned to me. You're both turning on me. No, I said. We're accepting what is. He lowered his gaze. I'll never forgive you for this. That's your choice. I turned toward the door. Effie stepped closer. What happens now, I'll speak to Clive. He'll draw up a lease. If you want to stay, you'll sign it. If not, we'll set a move-out date. I'll give you time to make arrangements. Cuthbert didn't respond. Effie just nodded. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves scattered along the walkway, gathering at the base of the steps. Clive opened the passenger door as I approached. Everything settled. Not yet, I said, settling into the seat. But it started. Clive and I spent the rest of that week reviewing every legal thread tied to the house. The paperwork had held just as we expected, but the situation around it grew more tangled by the day. Creditors began circling the press, ran a small article in the local section about a property fraud investigation involving a well-known broker, and Cuthbert's name started showing up in conversations I never wanted to overhear. On Friday, Clive had a folder delivered to my door. Inside were documents confirming the fraud investigation had moved forward. There were copies of default notices, a list of credit accounts opened in my son's name, but more alarming were 2 credit lines under mine. One from a high-interest lender I'd never heard of. The second from a company that had gone out of business 5 years ago. I called the number on the statement. The woman on the other end of the line asked for my address and date of birth. When I gave it to her, there was a pause. Thank you, Mrs. Whitlow. According to our records, this account was opened 6 years ago, secured by a home equity line from 32 Briarwood Lane. My voice stayed calm. And the signature digital authorization, she said, signed under the name Margaret H. Whitlow. If this wasn't you, we can begin the dispute process. I hung up and sat quietly for a while. Then I called Clive. We need to go deeper, I told him. If he used my name on anything else, I want it uncovered. The next morning, I took the bus to the county clerk's office. I wanted to see the records myself. The woman at the desk printed a full transaction history tied to the property. That's when I saw it, 3 refinance attempts. 1 denied, 2 approved. The earliest approval was from 7 years ago, co-signed digitally by me. I hadn't signed anything in 2018. I'd been recovering from surgery that spring, barely leaving the house, and certainly not authorizing any loans. My stomach turned. I walked home instead of calling a ride. It was nearly 5 miles, but the air helped. I kept my pace steady, letting my thoughts line up in time with my steps. When I reached my apartment, there was a note on the door. It was written in Cuthbert's handwriting. Please talk to me. I need to explain. Please. I folded the paper and placed it on the table without reading it again. That night I called Trixie. She picked up on the first ring. He forged your name, she asked. More than once, I said. She was quiet for a long time. You going to press charges? I don't know yet, but I'm not covering for him anymore. You never should have had to. I didn't answer. I'll drive you to the police station if you need me to, she said gently. I thanked her and hung up. The next day, Effie showed up at my door. She looked worn down, jacket sleeves, 2 long hair, tucked under a knit cap, lips chapped from the wind. I need to ask something, she said. Not for Cuthbert. For me. I let her in. She sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped tight. I didn't know about the forged signatures. I didn't know he was using your name. I swear on my children. I believed her. I should have asked questions, she said. I should have looked at the statements. What do you need, Effie? I'm leaving him, she said, the words dropping one by one. He's not going to change. I stayed too long trying to keep everything together, but it's falling apart anyway. I waited. I found an apartment near the elementary school. It's small, 2 bedrooms. I need help with the deposit and first month's rent. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. She kept talking. I've applied for work at the library downtown. There's a part-time position open. I've already got an interview. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, I said, I'll help you with the deposit. But this is the last time, Effie. No more loans, no more handouts. She nodded. I understand, and if you go back to him, it ends there. I won't. We made arrangements for the payment. I gave her 2 checks, both made out to the leasing agency. I made sure there was no cash. Before she left, she paused in the doorway. He won't stop calling you, she said. I know. I changed my number. That evening, I packed a small bag and went to stay with Trixie for a few nights. I needed distance, physical distance, from the phone, from the mailbox, from the memories attached to every room. Her guest room was small but quiet. I kept the window open a crack at night and listened to the rustle of trees outside. I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. 3 days later, Clive called. We've tracked all outstanding accounts tied to your name. The good news is, we can prove you didn't authorize them. The bad news is, we need to file formal charges to begin clearing them. I knew what that meant. It meant turning in my own son. I need time, I told him. You've already given enough, he said gently. I ended the call and sat on Trixie's porch for a while. The breeze smelled faintly of lilacs from the bush near the step. The sun was low and the air was soft. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the choice settle. In the morning, I would drive down to the sheriff's office and file the paperwork. The drive to the sheriff's office took just under 15 minutes. I took the long way past the reservoir and the open fields, giving myself space to breathe before I stepped into what came next. I had the documents Clive prepared, copies of loan statements, signatures, the forensic report confirming the forgery. I'd read through them so many times they didn't even feel real anymore. But they were. Every page a record of something taken. The lobby was quiet. A young woman at the desk greeted me with a gentle nod and handed me a clipboard. You're here to file a report? She asked. I nodded and gave my name. It took me 20 minutes to fill out the form. When I was done, she took the folder to the back and returned a moment later. Deputy Larson will speak with you. Please follow me. He met me in a small interview room, mid-40s, maybe with a tired but kind face. He closed the door gently behind us. Mrs. Whitlow, he said, I've reviewed the statement you submitted, and I understand you're pursuing charges of financial fraud against your son. I met his eyes. That's correct. He opened the folder, scanning the top pages. We'll need a formal statement from you. It may be recorded. I understand. He clicked his pen. We've been cooperating with the DA's office on related matters. Your son's name came up 2 weeks ago during an investigation into a series of property fraud cases. This helps us establish a clearer timeline. I folded my hands in my lap. I'm not doing this to ruin his life. I know, he said, but forgery of financial documents tied to real property is a serious offense. It carries both civil and criminal penalties. I gave my statement slowly. Dates, names, what I remembered, what I didn't. When he asked how I discovered the accounts, I told him about the phone call with the lender. When he asked if I had ever given Cuthbert permission, I said no. He nodded, scribbled notes, and paused once to refill his coffee. The air smelled faintly of paper and burnt filters. When we finished, he stood. You've done what you need to do. We'll take it from here. You'll be notified when the DA's office moves forward. I walked out into the daylight. The breeze was stronger now, cool against my neck. I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel worse. Just steadier. That night, I sat in the apartment and sorted through the drawer where I kept old receipts, letters, and clipped recipes. Near the bottom, I found an envelope I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a birthday card Cuthbert made in 5th grade construction paper crayons, 2 misshapen hearts, and a crooked smiley face. It said, "You're the best mom ever. I'll take care of you someday." I folded it back into the envelope and put it away. 2 days later, Effie called. She'd moved into the apartment near the school and started training at the library. Her voice sounded tired, but steadier than it had in weeks. "I got a notice from the court," she said. "It says, Cuthbert may be facing charges." "Yes." "He's blaming me," she said. "Told his sister I turned him in." "You didn't," I said. "I know, but it doesn't stop the calls. Or the messages." "I'm sorry." There was a pause. "I took a job cleaning offices on weekends. Extra money. I can cover groceries without asking anyone. That's good. The kids are adjusting. Amaryllis misses her old room. Eisenbard's quieter. But they're okay." I didn't know what to say to that. Effie hesitated. "Would you like to see them just for a short visit?" I thought about it. "Yes," I said. "But not at your place. Not at mine either. Maybe the park. Saturday afternoon, I'll bring sandwiches." We ended the call on neutral ground. Saturday came quickly. I arrived early and chose a bench near the fountain. The children ran up to me, first Amaryllis, wearing her red hoodie, Eisenbard, clutching a bag of trail mix. Effie followed behind slower, but smiling. We sat in the shade and talked about school, about books they were reading. Eisenbard told me he wanted to learn how to bake like I used to. I promised we could do that next time. When they left, I stayed on the bench a little longer, watching the leaves turn over in the wind. That evening, Clive called. "They've scheduled the hearing," he said. "Initial arraignment for next Tuesday. Will I need to be there?" "No," he said. "Not unless you want to." I thanked him and hung up. The apartment was quiet. I folded the laundry I'd left in the basket, tidied the kitchen, and laid out clothes for the next day. Before I went to bed, I made tea and stood by the window. Across the street, porch lights blinked on, one after another. The world kept moving. The sky was overcast when I pulled into the driveway of the old house. I hadn't been back since the locks were changed. The hedges were overgrown, the porch light fixture cracked, and the mailbox had come off its hinge. I stood there for a moment, keys in hand, before pushing open the gate and walking up the path. Clive had secured temporary access after the court ordered the property frozen pending full resolution of the fraud case. The front door creaked as it opened. Inside, the air was stale. It didn't smell like home anymore. Just dust, and something faintly metallic. I stepped into the foyer and set my bag down. Nothing looked broken, but the silence felt different now. There was no television in the background. No scent of dinner on the stove. Just furniture in place, like pieces on a board, motionless, waiting. I walked from room to room, flipping on lights, testing windows. The kitchen cabinets had been emptied. A few cups remained in the sink. On the living room floor, I found a single crayon wedged beneath the couch. Amaryllis must have dropped it before they left. Upstairs, the master bedroom still had the bedding I'd chosen years ago, pale green cotton, stitched with tiny leaves. I pulled open the closet and scanned the shelves. Cuthbert's suits were gone, but Effie's coat still hung near the door. I didn't touch it. I made my way to the attic last. The pull-down ladder groaned as it extended. I climbed slowly, flashlight in hand. The attic was just as I remembered: unfinished beams, old insulation, a few storage trunks. I walked toward the far wall, where I'd kept the photo boxes, the holiday decorations, the papers from before Harold died. I'd been meaning to sort them for years. That's when I saw it. A filing bin I didn't recognize. Black plastic newer than the rest, tucked behind an old lamp. I pulled it out and opened the lid. Inside were dozens of manila folders, each labeled by hand. Mortgage copies, loan applications, credit lines. Some I recognized. Most I didn't. Each one had my name typed across the top, Margaret H. Whitlow. But as I flipped through them, one after another, I saw the digital signatures at the bottom. The same scribble copied over and over. My name forged in cursive, slanted just wrong. One folder held a stack of printed emails. Correspondence between Cuthbert and 2 brokers. There were references to backdated forms, shell companies, even cash withdrawals tagged MW in the memo lines. The dates stretched back nearly 9 years. My hand stayed steady, but my breath caught. I set the papers aside and checked the bottom of the bin. There, folded in thirds, was a handwritten letter. I opened it. Mom, if you ever find this, it means things didn't go the way I hoped. I only wanted to fix things. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I know you won't forgive me, but I needed you to know it wasn't all greed. Some of it was fear. I tried to build something that could last. For Effie, for the kids, for you. I'm sorry. See, I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I folded it back up and placed it on top of the folder. I took the whole bin down with me and locked it in the trunk of my car. Back at the apartment, I called Clive. We need to meet, I said. I found something. He came over that evening. We went through the documents one by one, cataloging everything. He photographed each page and made a list of the broker names. This is enough, he said. More than enough. I nodded. He paused, then added, if we take this to the DA now, there's no walking it back. No room for negotiation. I know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, the house key resting beside the mug. I hadn't turned the heating on. The quiet felt heavy, but honest. The next morning, I drove the bin to the sheriff's office and handed it over. Deputy Larson looked through the first few folders and let out a low breath. This changes the timeline, he said. It makes it clear this wasn't accidental. I figured it might. He closed the bin. We'll update the record. This puts us in a different category. I signed a new statement. This time, my hand didn't shake. That afternoon, Effie called again. The kids want to see you, she said. Amaryllis made you a card. Can we bring it by this weekend? Yes, I said. Saturday's fine. Before she hung up, she asked quietly, Did you go back to the house? I did. Was it bad? It was honest. There was a pause. Thank you for helping me get out, she said. You did that yourself. Saturday came with bright skies. Amaryllis handed me the card, a folded sheet of construction paper with hearts and stars drawn in marker. Inside it said, You're still my grandma. I love you. We sat on the apartment floor eating sandwiches and watching an old nature program. Eisenbard told me he wanted to plant tomatoes this summer. I promised to help him find pots. When they left, I put the card on the windowsill. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the rug. I made a note to call Clive first thing Monday and ask about the updated charges. The courthouse stood quiet that morning, gray stone against a pale blue sky. Clive met me on the front steps just after 8. He wore a charcoal suit and carried a thin leather case tucked under one arm. I hadn't seen Cuthbert in almost 4 months. The last time we'd spoken, he'd still been insisting it was all a misunderstanding, just paperwork, just confusion. We passed through the security check and made our way to the second-floor hearing room. The benches were half full. A few reporters sat near the back. 2 women in dark jackets whispered near the aisle, one with a yellow legal pad balanced on her knee. Clive led me to the left side of the gallery. "We're observers today," he said. "The DA will present the charges. His counsel will enter a plea." I nodded and sat down, hands folded in my lap. Cuthbert walked in just after 9, flanked by his attorney. His hair was longer. He looked thinner. He didn't glance in my direction. He wore a navy blazer, no-tie shoes that scuffed the tile with each step. The judge entered, and everyone rose. The hearing began quickly: case number, docket reference, full legal name, date of birth. Then came the charges: wire fraud, forgery, identity theft, and 1 count of elder financial exploitation. I listened to the words without flinching. Each count carried its own weight. Each count named me as the victim. Cuthbert's attorney stood and entered a not guilty plea. The judge set a date for the preliminary hearing and instructed both parties to return with full documentation and witness lists. Bail had already been posted, so Cuthbert walked out the way he came in. Afterward, Clive and I sat in the small coffee shop across from the courthouse. The server brought us tea and toast. Neither of us spoke much until the room emptied out. "This is where things start to move quickly," Clive said. "The DA's office may offer a deal, but with the records you found in the attic, they'll likely push for sentencing. And the house pending seizure. The lien will be reversed. You may still recover the title if the fraud is proven before civil court." I stirred cream into my tea and watched it swirl. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was a formal notice from the probate court. Apparently, Harold's name had been used again in an attempt to reopen a trust he'd closed before he died. It had been flagged during the audit tied to Cuthbert's accounts. More forged documents, more signatures in the wrong hand. I took the envelope to Clive's office and handed it over. "This," he said, flipping through the pages, "will help." On the day of the preliminary hearing, Effie met me outside the courthouse. She wore a dark green blouse and carried a folder of her own emails Cuthbert had sent her, instructing her to sign blank documents and scan them from the school printer. "He said it was for refinancing," she said. "I didn't question it. We'll give it to the DA." She exhaled and followed me inside. This time, the courtroom was fuller. A local reporter took notes in the front row. The prosecutor presented the case in measured terms, reviewing bank statements, property records, and digital communications. The defense objected twice. Both were overruled. When they called my name, I stood and walked to the witness stand. The bailiff had me raise my right hand. I swore to tell the truth. I spoke plainly about the loan, the forged documents, the discovery in the attic. I answered the prosecutor's questions without emotion. When the defense asked if I had a personal grudge, I said no. I loved my son, but I didn't give him permission. Effie testified next. Her voice wavered but held steady. She confirmed the emails, the scanned forms, the bank visits. When she finished, she stepped down and sat beside me. Outside, we waited while the judge reviewed the materials. A clerk came out 30 minutes later and handed the DA a sealed envelope. The judge found sufficient grounds, the prosecutor told us. "This will proceed to trial." Effie let out a long breath. I didn't think he'd really go through with it all. "I know." 3 days later, I received a certified letter from Cuthbert's attorney. It offered a proposed settlement return of the property title, full confession to 1 count of fraud, recommendation for leniency in sentencing, and a request that I write a letter to the court asking for probation in lieu of prison time. I read the letter twice. Then I called Clive. "We don't have to accept that," he said. "I know, but I'll meet with the DA. We scheduled a meeting for Friday. In the meantime, I visited the house again. This time, I brought a bag of gloves cleaner and a fresh key. The porch creaked under my steps. Inside, the light filtered through dust-specked glass. I walked through each room and opened the windows. By late afternoon, I had cleaned the counters, vacuumed the hallway, and stripped the beds. In the kitchen, I found a single blue cup left in the corner cabinet. I washed it, dried it, and placed it on the shelf. That evening, I sat in the living room with the windows open. The air was cool. A mockingbird sang somewhere near the fence. I sat at my kitchen table that morning with a fresh sheet of paper and the court's letter beside me. The sun hadn't yet crested over the hedges, but the house was already warm. I could smell the faint trace of lemon from yesterday's cleaning, the last of the polish still lingering on the windowsills. I picked up my pen and started slow. To the Honorable Court, I wrote, I have considered your request for a victim impact statement, and while I could list the financial damage or the grief of losing my son in all the ways that matter, I believe what's most important is this. I am not seeking revenge. I'm seeking the return of peace. The words came easier after that. I didn't dwell on the betrayal or the weight of it all. I described the years of trust I had offered, the slow unraveling, the toll it took when someone you love decides you are theirs to use. I spoke plainly the way I would have spoken to Harold. I ended the letter with one final thought. May whatever sentence is handed down be one that helps him understand what he threw away. And may it give the rest of us, those left behind, a little room to breathe again. I folded the page neatly, slid it into the envelope, and walked it to the mailbox before noon. A month later, Cuthbert was sentenced to 7 years. The judge read my letter aloud in the courtroom, though I wasn't there to hear it. Clive called me that evening and said the courtroom had gone very quiet when it reached the last line. Effie wrote once from a new address in North Carolina. Just a short note. She'd taken a teaching position at a local elementary school. Said the days were long, but the kids made her laugh. She asked if I'd kept the green vase on the mantel. I had. The house in time came back to itself. The title was cleared, and the lien was lifted. Clive helped me set up a new deed in my name alone. I planted chrysanthemums in the front bed and painted the back fence white again. Some evenings I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea and think about everything that had passed. I didn't try to wrap it in meaning, didn't try to explain it away. Some things just happen slow and quiet and painful. But we go on. I'm 72 now. My days are smaller, gentler. I bake more. I walk when the weather is nice. I no longer wait for anyone to knock or apologize. The door is locked, but the windows stay open. If there's a lesson in all of this, it might be this. There's a difference between forgiveness and forgetting. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself, for the ones who remain, is to simply start again without them. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to rebuild something alone, quietly, stubbornly, I hope you'll leave a comment or share this with someone who understands. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. Sometimes the smallest stories carry the strongest truths.